Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Parenting Tools podcast. Today is a really special interview because we interviewed Jo Frost, who you might know as Supernanny. I really enjoyed speaking to Jo. Jo is still helping families to this day. Of course, she is an author. Of course, she is a TV personality, but she is really passionate still about helping families and helping children first and foremost. We're going to dive straight into this one because I know a lot of you have been waiting for it. So this is the Parenting Tools with Jo Frost.
Sweet, I'm so tired of you. Sweet, I'm so tired of you treating me this way. I'm sick and then I'm...
Well, hey, Jo, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's so good, genuinely, to have you.
So good.
We were talking earlier, and we think, not just because you're on the show, we don't usually just try to flatter our guests. We genuinely think that you've influenced a generation of parents. So thank you for that, first of all. But yeah, welcome to the Parenting Tools podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you for saying as such, because, you know, that was the intention, to be able to, at the time, back in 2004, really bring more awareness to how we consciously parent. But to continue doing that, you know, I'm still around 20 years publicly, still doing what I do. And now it's the next generation and building on how we have evolved as family as well. So thank you.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. We were just chatting before we were recorded, like how we said we'd watch the show with our parents, and now we've got kids of our own, sort of implementing those things that maybe we didn't even realize were going in. And you specifically like watched the show. So yes, it's amazing. Like you said, what a career you've had. So yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. It has been an amazing journey so far, you know, and the work is still continuing. I think what's been really brilliant is that when the show first came out and I first started helping families, you know, back then it was very much adult viewing. But now it really has become a gateway. So many children, especially with social media opening up the way it has over the last 14 years, has really, you know, the show has really become a gateway for teenagers and in-betweeners, you know, just being able to have conversations with their parents watching those shows. So you have like people like yourself who grew up with it and now parents, and some of them have children that are old enough that watch the show and they discuss what's going on with the families. And that is really beautiful, you know, to be able to instigate those kind of conversations and open up the dialogue.
Yeah, brilliant. So when we posted on social media saying Jo Frost, Supernanny's coming on, send us your questions, we were inundated. So we've picked some out. So if we're all right to dive into some questions, the first one is this, and it's about returning to work and childcare. So we know that many parents sort of feel that guilt of sending their children to childcare, especially women when they return to work. How can parents, women, feel like they're connected and supporting their children in the best way around that time?
Well, let's just jump to the fact that, you know, we've got a system right now that's not supporting mothers in the way that we'd all like to see right now, with respects to a government and corporate companies and just, you know, independent companies recognizing how can they, you know, support families where we have mothers having more flexibility in the workspace so that they can competently do what they do, as it is predominantly mothers who are still sacrificing in this dilemma of work and career and really, you know, work to put bread and butter on the table, right? To be able to, you know, financially provide that support for their families. And that is still an ongoing conversation that I'm hoping these barriers are being broken so that women and families are given more support so that they can fundamentally be there for their children longer in those formative years, because that's incredibly important. And we know right now that on a global level, when you think of like America and the UK, you know, affordable childcare is a huge problem with respects to how do mothers, fathers, families receive this support for their children when they're having to work the hours that they are just to keep their heads above water in inflation and recession that's happened and a global pandemic that has spiked, you know, the prices of everything. and remain connected to their children. So I just, you know, I can't have that conversation without flagging the importance of the work that needs to be done. And I'll say also for the staff that are working in these nurseries as well, because they're very underpaid. You know, they're very underpaid for the precious work that they do every day, spending time with our precious children every day. So, you know, that I'd like to see come to conclusion with more support. However, there are many a family that have their children in nurseries, in, you know, pre-care. And I do think it's important that families have structure and routine that specifically allow them to recognize the vital importance of being able to emotionally connect with their children. And that looks like the time that you spend, even if it's a small amount of time, consistently in the morning. That requires you having to look at the times children are going to bed in the evening and how much you're taking on in the evening so that you're getting the sleep that you need. It requires you having to look at the time that's concentrated, even if it is a small amount of time, when you come home from work, so that your children do not feel like they're part of a conveyor belt and it's this production of get this done, then get that done, then get this done, then get the kids to bed. Oh, now I can relax. And that monotony of ongoing production line creates more anxiety for parent and child, because there's not a moment where we go, right, we've only got this window. And this window means that I've not seen my children all day. My kids have not seen me all day either. Something has to give. And it cannot always be everything else that needs to get done. You have to recognize, what's the long-term plan? You know, what's the long goals here? And what's going to be more important? And so I can hear right now parents saying, well, that's easier said than done, Joe, because I've got amalgamation of things that need to get done and they have to get done. And I've got kids to put to bed and I've got all different ages. And at that point, I will push back and make the parents say, think about what needs to go. Think about what can be given right now at that moment. Think about over a week, how you pace yourself with what needs to get done. Think about the priorities of the needs that need to be met, not the wants, but the needs. Because you're either going to be a parent that's going to find 1,000 excuses for an outcome that you want, or you're going to find solution for that. And so it's not to minimize the weight that families are carrying, but it truthfully is about parents recognizing what's important to them and their child, and how do they prioritize that, and what will they need to say no to. So that time in the morning, when your children get home from school, just before your children are going to bed, the moments of where you can have fun and just let your hair down and enjoy each other's company, even if it's 15, 20 minutes, but consistent every day of the week, I will take that over sporadic moments where you've had an hour and then nothing for a week, had 40 minutes and nothing for 2 weeks. So you are better to have a smaller amount of concentrated quality time consistently, rather than the sporadic notion of, I don't know when I'm going to fit it in. It creates more stability. It creates more permanent emotional connection. And I think really the overall is peace, because most parents just want peace, right? They want to be able to come home. And if we value that amongst anything else, we start to recognize what we need to let go of and surrender, so that we don't keep subscribing to a culture that gives merit to parents that are spinning 30 plates. I don't believe that's the spiritual lesson. I think the spiritual lesson of this parenting journey is the amount of plates that you can spin that is less and not more of. But we live in a world and a system that supports that, that gives merit to that. And it should be completely opposite, because less is more. Like when we overschedule, right? And we give too much and our kids are absolutely exhausted, and we are, but we never turn around and say, let's just stop and just take a couple that they can really enjoy every week. There is this FOMO. We want our children to experience every sport in one term. We want them to experience everything in life in the first 7 years. And we all know, as we get older, that those milestones become privileges, right? They become privileges to be able to do something at this age, or, you know, we get to a certain age and we can start taking driving lessons and get our own experience, right? So again, we kind of want it all now because we see it all now on social media. And I'm like, slow down. Let's just take baby steps and just cross one bridge, enjoy the view, and then let's just walk slowly where we see the other bridge, you know?
No, that completely like resonates. And all I could think was, so my daughter's just started school, so she's 4. And if you would kind of look at me and my family's life, you'd probably say that our parenting side is very organized. We love like routine and schedules. Everything outside of that feels like a complete mess and like a constant reevaluation of how we're going to sort those things out. And that's all stemming from like, we recognize that we're not going to be able to do all these things really well. And so we'll just try and do the family part really well. And everything else is just a little bit messy. But what we find is that our routine is changing like constantly. Like it'll be the same for like a month and then it will all change again. And then we'll have like a hectic week and then we'll find that routine again. But just continually like trying to reevaluate that. And we're like, so today we tried to make sure that we're not just like suckers to the routine as well. So like instead of having our normal dinner today, we went to Subway. That's not an ad, but it's just, but it was like a family activity, and it was just like.
Correct. But Jason, what you're talking about is keeping the cornerstones of a routine. So you never want, you know, this is important for families to know, because they'll hear me go on and on about routine. The importance of routine is the cornerstones of a routine, right? It's the importance of knowing how much sleep your children need. It's important to understand the importance of an even keel with those meal times. It's important, depending on the age, whether it's 4, 8, or 2, the sleep that happens during the afternoons, or the chunks in the morning or the afternoon where one can have activities. They're the cornerstones. So if one day, you know, you get to 4:30, 4:45, and you know that's your cornerstone of mealtime, it doesn't necessarily have to be at home, but the cornerstones of the time in which your young children eat are really important, right? So, you know, you mix up the variation of where you may be, but the cornerstones always remain present. And the chaos that you talk about is organized chaos. It's the moments that are not there. And I want families to be comfortable in that, because some families are not. They need everything so rigid that when they come off of it, they feel like something's wrong. And it's not, it's just organized chaos. It's the moment when 5 kids are screaming, you can't keep them all happy. One wants to do something, the other one wants to do something else. You realize this cannot be child-led right now. This needs to be family-led. I need to do what's good for the entire family. And then you make a decision. And I would rather families make that decision, learn from it, and go, well, that actually did work out all right. I was kind of winging it, but you know what? I learned something from it. Then be in paralysis and not make a decision at all, because parents do need to lead in that fashion. And the more you can put yourself in those uncomfortable positions and make those decisions repetitively, the more competent you will become. And I truly believe that that competence is what leads to confidence. And so if you look at my books, you know, Jo Frost, Confident Baby Care, Jo Frost, Confident Toddler Care. It's about families feeling more confident in the unique journey that they're on. And we have a lot of parents right now, guys, that are really not feeling confident about how they're parenting. And if I'm being really honest, I think that's part of my own profession with many other professionals, that social media has opened up a sort of hole of everyone's an expert, everyone's got an opinion, and there's not a lot of wisdom out there and expertise, but there's a lot of opinions, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is why we invite the experts like yourself on, because we are not them.
But you are with your own children. But you are with your own children, because you know your children. You're living day in and day out, and you're learning from them, and they're learning from you. And one day is not the same as the next, cornerstones or not. In other words, every day is a fresh day, a fresh opportunity. And sometimes it sucks, just couldn't get anything right today. And I hope that parents don't beat themselves up too much about it, because it's not about being perfect, but it's about taking a shower, taking a nice bath, being kind to yourself, and go, what did I learn from today? What did I learn? What did I get right today, even though it felt like everything screwed up? Because we talk about the milestones a lot, but I think we have to take the inch stones as well. We have to look with different spectacles on. We have to be able to have the self-awareness to go, well, what was a victory today? What were the things? I don't think parents spend enough time saying to themselves, well, that might have been a complete mess, but you know what? Today I did X, Y, and Z. And I was actually better at doing that than last week. And look how the children behave because of that. Parents beat themselves up. Life's difficult enough already. Parents are under enough pressure already in the living circumstances that they're in every day in society, with little to none support, right? Little to none support because of funding and training, and those that have leadership not prioritizing the importance of how they can contribute with empathy to have a society that is well and has good wellness, mental wellness, right? And so we've got to be our own, for the want of a better word, we've got to be our own cheerleaders. We've got to be able to say, well, that sucked, but you know what? I did this today, and that's worth something. That counts. And yes, it is optimism. And I believe in optimism, and I believe in hope, in us being able to just do better every day to improve our circumstances, all to be in a place of more peace again, right? A place of more confidence.
Yeah, we get a lot of comments and questions around mom guilt as well. So that's just combating that with just reminding yourself how well you've done. And I think you do that a lot on the shows as well. You're always reinforcing to the parents, look, you actually done something here that you didn't do last week. I love that.
And going back to what you're saying, how do you counter that constant feeling of guilt? I think really looking at what you are doing. I feel so guilty. Well, yeah, because, when you're putting your kids into school, and, really, quite frankly, there are a lot of families that have to. But if you didn't have to, and you could have a choice to be at home with your children until the age of 3, most parents would do that. Most parents would do that. And there are parents that have careers and they want to be able to continue on that ladder, and they should have the choice as well. So again, there's much that can be done with respects to how we can support our families so that they're not carrying that guilt. But until then, it's a tough pill to swallow, but you are instrumental in how you cut yourself a break from that, right? And alleviate yourself from that, because only you can do it. No one else can give that to you, only you.
Yeah, me and my wife are really feeling the tension at the moment of that kind of lack of support. We both have to work full time. If we could, we wouldn't, for the sake of my daughter. And even so, we're at the moment doing a little bit of flexi schooling, only one day a week, just because that's as much as we can get in.
Yeah.
But many of our listeners, and even including us, like our kids were born in lockdown. And one side of that afforded us like a time that we wouldn't have had otherwise. I got to be at home for like the formative like 8-9 months of my daughter's life. A lot of people are in that same kind of boat. Have you noticed there been any sort of differences in parenting, or maybe even some insights that we should have learned from that?
It's a great question. I mean, yes. I mean, look, I was, I was seeing, and I mean, look, I help families. I provide service in helping families when they're very challenged in difficult situations, to give children a voice, right? So that they become visible in all of this, right? To champion for them in how I help their parents. But when COVID came, and I've said this a lot, and I'll say it again, it was a great big fat Sharpie pen that the universe went, stop, time out. Like, we need to get a grip here. Like, whatever was going on in your family, COVID provided, the global pandemic provided an opportunity for you to see that in neon colors and say, right, how do we, when we're home, address this situation? What, we can't run from it. We can't, you go into the office, I go into the office, crossing ships at night, finding excuses. There you were with your partner, or maybe you were a single parent, now realizing that it was no longer about pride. It was about reaching out and learning to lean on your friends and close family members, and recognizing how you could support each other through Zoom, through being together, the boundaries that would be put in place, the time that you would spend together. You mentioned, your children were very young and were being born, so it gave you the opportunity to really connect with your children, to maybe go through the early learning educational games and toys that you could play with them repetitively over and over again, because there's nothing better than human beings, our loving parents, to be able to teach us that. However, we were all in fight or flight. We were all panicked. People were dying. We were in a grave situation, an unprecedented part of history, right? And so that brought fear and loss of jobs. That brought many not knowing how they were going to find the next paycheck and food. And when you are, as many families still are, operating in survival mode, it means that we're all high wired. Our nervous systems are, hyper vigilant constantly, that state of alert constantly. And that brought a lot of burnout for families. It brought a lot of them feeling extremely overwhelmed. And at that moment, I was filming, and I called it a day. It got too dangerous. I'm like, shut shop. I need to protect my families. I need to protect my crew. I need to protect myself. Like, we shut shop. We were like 2 episodes and families shy of doing a complete season. And I knew what I was doing. I was going to go straight into voluntary work. I was right behind those doctors and those nurses and those teachers, helping all of them with their families, because they were on the front line, right? And so, in that moment, we were all in disarray of what was happening, yet so many families were in a space of, well, how am I going to do this? How's my child going to learn? They're going to lose this education. I'm like, right now, the only job that you need to do is to keep your family alive. Keep your family alive. Keep your family alive. Recognize the space. Communicate with your partner. And I'd never done so much couples therapy in my entire career as what I'd done at that period of time. Because at that moment, whether you were a throuple, whether you were a couple, whether you were 2 single parents living in a household, whether you were a generational family, a sandwich family with different generations, whatever you were as your dynamic as family, it was about how quick you could adapt, how quick you recognize the importance to communicate, and to start working out how you're going to make things work for you so that you could keep literally this alive, your head above water, and your children. And it was a very trying time globally for many families, as we know. And a lot of good came out of that, meaning it started to shift what was important, what was a priority, the perspective on life, what was really important, what really mattered to your family. And it had to come to that. And you were either going to take this opportunity to say enough, and we're never going to go back to how it was, because I don't think we should go back to how it was. Let's create the new norm. Let's create the things that are going to work for us as a family. Let's understand what truly, really is important to us and what matters. And some of those families came out better, and some of those families unfortunately divorced, and some of those families looked at how they were going to create more cohesive collaboration of peace in their households. However, what it did do is also create a lot of children who were on screen time, and they'd spent a hell of a lot of time on screen time, because the iPad, the phones became the electronic babysitter. And that has continued for parents and for children in a way that I believe has been detrimental to children and to families, because it became a quick fix in the moment, and those quick fixes then became permanent. And we became reliable and dependent on technology, where it has now become a situation where I notice speech and language can be sometimes delayed with children because they've spent too much. It's created an increase in behavior from withdrawal for the amount of hours that they were spending. Babies, 10 months, 11 months, being given, their parents' phone to just constantly amuse them, right? A lot, toddlers continuously watching, parents not monitoring. And we have a landscape right now of social media and technology that are rooms that, if they existed in our physical landscape, we would never push our kids into those rooms. We wouldn't go into them ourselves, And so like anything that is novel that then becomes a permanent structure in society, we have to look at how we use it as a tool, and that we don't abuse it so that it is of detriment to the family unit and the real true human connections that we absolutely need as human beings, and that our children need. And that's something I feel very passionate about. It's something that is incredibly important right now, that we're seeing all over social media because it's become mainstream. But a lot of us professionals knew 12 years ago, this is going to be a problem if families do not respect the era that we're going into and understand that they are going to have to be the ones that limit the amount of time that their children are going on it, or the age in which they are using the technology. And so I think that was the real big one, because we came into the technology era, and that was a force, that families relied on. But at the same time, it was kind of like dancing with the devil, right? And so again, everything, I believe, in this parenting space, you can either use to enhance your experience as a parent, or really abuse. I mean, that is the right word, abuse, where it becomes a detriment. And, look at playpens. Like right now, playpens are really popular on social media. You see all these families with massive playpens. They're not like the pack and plays that I remember, right? Or maybe yourself. They look like half a living room, and they're all wooden and fancy, and they've got the little floor mats. And I'm looking at these thinking, they're great if you're doing something for 20 minutes, even 30 minutes, and you've got the toys in the playpen. But when did we start cutting off their home for 10 hours of the day? Like, the idea is to teach your children how to have the space in their home, your home as a family, and to recognize logically what we need to put away, because it could be dangerous, right?
Yep.
And so we have to make it kid friendly, and then navigating themselves around the living room and up and down the staircase and into the kitchen, and where the area cuts off because it's too close to the oven, or we have to provide safety. So again, you take something as simple and you take something as familiar as a playpen, and that can become detriment if you're keeping your kids in there like you're keeping a dog in a playpen, right, for too long. And I'm old enough to have seen that come around twice, because I remember when playpens were abused, they went away, then they come back in over the last, I don't know, I'm going to say over the last 10 years, 8 years, became really fancy. Different companies shushed them up, right? And now they're back on the social media circuit, and everyone's like, oh, great idea. But for how long? Are you going to be connected? Are you going to be in there? Are you going to be together with your little one? Are you going to be giving them face recognition, tone, repetition? Are you going to be reading to them? So again, I see a lot of things, because I've been in this field for nearly 40 years, coming around twice. Yeah. And I just want to be able to give families that advice so that they can think about what I've said and make smarter choices.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just ask a follow-up question to the screen time? Are there any, so if we've have any listeners thinking, do you know what, I do need to reduce the screen time, and I know I need to do it, I just don't know how, because as soon as I take the device away, we have a meltdown. Have you got any tools or techniques or tips for that sort of, it's weaning, isn't it?
Expect the meltdown. Expect the meltdown. Number one, the bottom line is, parents don't want their children to cry. They don't want their children to be disappointed. Oh, but my child's so stubborn and they're going to cry and I don't want them to cry. Why? Because you as a parent did the right thing, because you turned around and you said, darling, you can have it for 30 minutes, okay, after you've had dinner, but then there's no more, okay, until Friday. I don't want to. I'm going to have oh, no, I don't want that. I want to do what's right as a parent, but I don't want my kid to cry. I don't want my kid to be upset with me. What's more important? What's more important? You have to do what's right. It's the integral thing to do as a parent. Do what's right by your children, and understand that doing that means that your kids are not always going to love that. I mean, I'm sure you remember, because I certainly remember saying to my mum, oh, but so-and-so's allowed out until 9 o'clock. Well, I don't care what so-and-so's mother's doing. You're going to be in at this time because that's the time we want you in. Oh, but that's not fair. Well, life is not always fair. I understand you want to go out, but this is what we're doing in our family. Having that with conviction, I think that's so important. So how do we help? I think it's important to understand when you are, as a parent, trying to fill the gap for something that you need to look at for yourself, or is it about saying, I don't mind my child at this age having half an hour here and half an hour there, but I'm going to explain it to my child so they understand the rules around technology, and then I'm not going to beat myself up trying to pacify, trying to control, trying to deal with this. At some point, your children are not going to like what you stipulate as a parent. If you're doing your job right and you are thinking of them, they won't thank you now. Parents want immediate gratification. They want medals all along. at each stage. You know, are you parenting for yourself or are you parenting for your kids? Because it is the most selfless, beautiful, frustrating, really, opportunity in life that you can give yourself, right? If you can, right, in this world, to have the honor, to raise another human being in this world so that they can grow up being their authentic self in a loving home that has boundaries and rules and validation and emotional connection with your parents. And that's a tall order for a lot of parents because they're learning how to heal from their own upbringing and to nurture the healing of that whilst being triggered by their own young children who are bringing this up in full force, you know? So the answer is recognize yourself. Am I doing this for me or am I doing this for them? Is this because I just need more time, that I need more quiet? And if that is, then what do I do for myself? What do I take off those spinning plates? What do I start saying no to? What do I start prioritizing for myself? Where do I lean to get help and support, right? Where can I? You know, these are the moments so that when you do stipulate as a parent, this is the limited time that I want, here are the rules. Hey, I want us to all sit around the dining table and have dinner because it's the only chance we get on a Wednesday and a Sunday. And I want us to talk. I want to catch up with everyone. I want to find out what's going on, what you've been doing, what, you know, what you've heard of. I want to be able to do that, right? These moments of socialness, of coming together and eating. If that requires no phones like it should, right, then hey, no phones on the table. No phones on the table. I mean, as adults, how many times have we arranged to see someone for lunch and this is what they do? Oh, I saw that. That was an amazing show. I was like stunned. Did you see it? Hold on. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't talk right now. I'm at lunch. Yeah, okay, I'll call you back. Bye. Sorry about that. So yeah, it was amazing. But did you see that so-and-so is coming out next week as well? Hold on, let me just hold on. No, not now. How many times do we deal with that as adults? Constant barrage. So we have to be the ones, you know, that are more aware ourselves. Because what does that say to the other person? That we're not interested, you know, in their company, that we can't hold an hour with them to see our great friends, to hang out. Different if it's a business luncheon, you know, that's different. But again, we all have to be in a space where we can become more mindful, because otherwise technology will be the biggest distraction in your family. It will not enhance the communication. It will not enhance the physical connection to just be in the moment and enjoy those moments as a parent. And I know certainly in my career as well, when your kid says something goofy or you say something or they say something really interesting, you're like, this is a really special moment. Like I can feel it. Like it touched me in a way that felt really, it just felt different. Like, oh, look, we're here. Like we're robbing ourselves of that. So let's be comfortable with recognizing, is it for us or is it for our kids? And let's recognize that it's not our job to continuously make our children happy, but it is our job to do right by our kids, to do the right thing, to have the integrity to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
That's a great point.
Yeah, we talk about like screen time quite a lot, and especially when we first started recording this, my daughter's very young, and like kids replicate what they see, and so we talked a lot about not being on our phones. Yeah. One of our guests recently kind of opened up the conversation, really making the point that if you allow it, technology will rule everything. So you have to kind of dictate to it all the boundaries, all the algorithms, everything, even for your kids. For the listeners that need like a number, like how much screen time is enough a day for a kid? What's the limit? Are there easy, clear boundaries for those sorts of things, or is it a little bit more up in the air?
Well, personally, I mean, I've done an Instagram post on this. I feel there is no place for any screens at all for a child below the age of 3. I really don't. I just don't. I want a child, you know, totally in a space where they're learning through human interaction, right? And the educational toys that they have in front of them, you know. But I know that families don't do that. And so realistically, the smallest amount of time, if it's a 15-minute vignette, then so be it, which means it requires a parent to be able to look at what they need to prioritize during the day and say no to, because parents are just as addicted. And right. it's a you know, I mean, Jason and Jordan, it's a big problem.
Yeah,
you know, we've got a big problem. I mean, I'm helping families wean children off of technology as young as 4 and 5 years old, and they're smashing things in the house because they cannot go on the phones. It's a problem. You know, you're wiring your child's brain to receive this dopamine and this serotonin, right? This fix, this constant fix, to the point that the things that we would know as being natural, beautiful things for children in their childhood no longer suffice, because they're not getting the same kick in the way that these games and these shows are being made, right? I mean, you know, think about walking into Vegas and all those slot machines and the noise. Beep, 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 boop, 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 beep, 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 beep. You're alert, 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 alert. They're making shows like that now. They're bringing in those people, those specialists that will say this is what will keep adults in these rooms longer. And they're now applying that to how they're making children's TV. Like, that's dangerous, right? Because it's creating the same withdrawal impact. And so kicking a ball around, playing goalie, right? Grabbing a bean bag and putting it in a bucket and then running around, jumping in puddles. We keep going the way we're going, and that no longer is going to be exciting anymore. The things that we remember that were just natural, playful things to do. Going back and forth on the swing, up and down the slide, round and round on that roundabout, pick up sticks, all those things that allow us to gauge and assess and to work out like where the risk is, right? Where the danger is. Oh, we're going to climb this wall. It's a little bit higher than what we're used to doing, but we're going to do it. And we're going to balance our way. As our parents say, are you good there? I'm right here, right? So again, that's very much part of a child's natural physical childhood, right? There's something that they do in their childhood every day, you know, being that physical. If we're coming home and all we're doing is putting one of these, right, or an iPad in front of our children, we've just robbed them of that. We've just robbed our children of that. You know, I mean, you can't sugarcoat this. You know, you can't sugarcoat it. It's that serious. So, you know, it really comes from parents. The parents that say, oh, but I just can't. It's easier said. No, you can. In the same way that you choose what you put in your shopping cart when you go shopping. If there's no cookies, if there's no crap in those cupboards, your kids cannot eat it, because they got no money to go down the shop and buy a load of fizzy drinks, big boxes of crisps, loads of chocolate, all the cake. You put it in there. You went and you put all of that in there. Now, I'm not saying that a child can't have a Bakewell tart. I'm not saying that a kid can't have a packet of crisps. I'm not saying that we should label good, you know, good and bad. I think it's moderation for everything.
Yeah.
But when you go shopping yourself and you're filling that trolley and you're putting that stuff in there and you're saying, well, you know, they just love it. I just can't help. No. You bought it. You put it in the fridge. You put it in the cupboard. And, you know, Jason and Jordan, I'm not the popular voice because I'm saying something they don't want to hear, which is, oh, I've got to be accountable.
Yeah.
Oh, it's me. I'm the one that went shopping. I'm the one that did it. Like, I don't like what you're saying, Joe. I feel like you're judging me. I'm not. I'm just a mirror. I'm just a mirror. I'm giving you the truth because that's all I want to give you. And if that makes you feel defensive, that makes you have to look at yourself, if that makes you question your parenting so that you can change those decisions and empower yourself as a parent to do better by your children, then that's a job well done. That's a job well done. It's not always the voice you want to hear, kind of like with your parents, right? It wasn't always the response you wanted to hear, but you know now as a parent.
Oh, it's come
right?
back around.
That's the job, isn't it? That's the job description.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of know now as a parent, you know, give or take, right? Because you take the stuff you loved and you don't, hopefully you don't take the stuff that you didn't love. You know now that you go, I get it now. God, absolutely. I get it. God, I get it. I was a handful. I get it now. Right? You know?
No, absolutely. My son the other day, he was asking me to, there was a song that he wanted on. I said, look, we're not having it on because it's got a bad word in it. And he said, what's the bad word? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, what's the bad word? I said, I'm not going to tell you. He said, I won't be your friend. And I said, it's all, I'm okay with you not being my friend for 5 minutes if it means you're not walking around saying things I don't want you to say. So yeah, that was and then he took a guess. He took a guess at what the word was, and he was wrong. But it made me laugh.
How old is your little one?
He's 5. He's just turned 5, and I've got a 3-year-old daughter as well.
Right. Okay. So just turned 5. So again, you know, you bring up something that a lot of parents, don't want to be, but they end up becoming. You know, is the friend. Right. Well, your parents make different decisions for you. They are there to guide you, right? And they love you in a very different way than your friends do, in the respect that, you know, they're making those decisions, right? And I would say that for a lot of parents that I talk to, what they're saying to me is, I want to have this beautiful friendship with my children when they're older. Right? Yeah. The friendship that when I'm older and they're young adults, it can feel like that we have a deep friendship. And what they're really saying is that I want that connection. I want that warmth. I want that moment where I know I'm always a parent, but I believe that you go from parenting, practical parenting, which is the doing, right? You're doing and you're both in that space now, to when they become teenagers, you go more into the space. If you've done your job really well and they've learned life skills, you then go more into a space of mentorship. It's more about mentoring. You're not telling them, but you know, you're either ears, or they're coming to you for advice, or they just want you to listen and they just want a soundboard and they just want you to, you know, listen to what they're saying and empathize with how they may be feeling. And so you go into these different phases in parenthood. But I think most of those parents who are saying, I want friendship, need to realize that if you be a parent first and do what you're supposed to be doing because you're a parent with your kids, it morphs into that. You have that beautiful relationship that's warm and all of the feeling inside that you want, that continues as they get older.
So we've got some quick fire questions that listeners have sent in, if that's okay, Joe, before we let you go. Okay. A few listeners asked us this about the naughty step, and they said, would you still recommend it? A side note for me, people are really passionate about the naughty step, one way or the other online that I've seen. Talk a little bit about that. Where did it come from? Do you stand by it? All that sort of stuff.
All right. So I guess I'm going to spill the tea here. So my version of a timeout is modified from what we know back in the 1900s, right? A timeout back in the 1900s was putting a child in the corner, asking them to turn their face into the corner. Sometimes you saw pictures, right, and drawings of children in school with these big pointed hats
Ah,
on.
the dunce
Remember
hat,
that,
yeah.
right? It was humiliation. Children were not seen, weren't heard. There was no emotional intelligence, the connection there with parent and child. It was do as you say, because I'm the parent, I'm in charge, I'm in control. Very authoritarian, right? And when children were put in a timeout, right, back then, it was all about face to the wall, humiliation, front of everybody else, right? My version modified that. There was no turning to the wall and no isolating the child. The child was very present in the room or just adjacent there so they could see the rest of the family. And there were very specific steps that created a boundary. Now, parents have to have boundaries. It's most important. We all do. Healthy boundaries create better relationships, right? Whether that's at work or in the family. And so the idea, which basically is a timeout, and, you know, naughty is mischievous behavior, and a step was something I'd used. And that's how the word came around, naughty step, right? It was, naughty was describing mischievous behavior, right? Being disrespectful, right? And add that to the step, right? But it's a timeout. It's generally a timeout. It's what we see in sports. Foul play, timeout on the bench, right? Not for the rest of the game, maybe for the second half. It's timeout. We see it in baseball. We see it in American football. We see it, you know, see it with football back at home, right? So again, my version specifically with the steps is to create a space, a healthy boundary when unacceptable behavior is being given to a parent or a sibling or anyone else, okay? And that space creates a moment to diffuse this heated aggression, sometimes from child, sometimes from parent.
Oh, yeah.
And they need to learn more emotional regulation as well. However, there are 3 types of tantrums that I have observed in my career. And that's a mop tantrum, which is knowing how to behave in order to get what you want, right? So you cry, you scream, and as soon as you get it, you stop immediately, stop. There is an emotional tantrum, right? Which is a child in an emotional situation that the parent needs to emotionally connect with the child. That could be new school, it could be a new baby, it could be something that's a new environment. So emotionally, they're feeling upheaval for that, which is very different to a mock, because mock is, I've learned to behave like this, and this is what I get. Or a situational, right? You're in a situation, like the park, and you don't want to leave, right? All of this has underlying reasons. So predominantly on Supernanny, you saw behavior where children had been taught by their families mock circumstances. A child knew exactly how to behave for a parent to then respond exactly the same way as well. And they were adding to the fire by trying to control the child. And so a naughty step became a space for the child to sit down and to be told why they were sitting there, to diffuse this heated behavior that was happening between sometimes parent and child. And trust me, I cannot tell you the amount of families right now that want my consultation because their kids are kicking them, slapping them in the face, punching them in the gut. Like, it's got really bad, yep. Right? And so it creates this space, a boundary for the child to understand that this is not acceptable. It's not okay. Now, the parent has to go back and explain to the child, and the child over a period of time with the yin yang of positive parenting and instilling the life skills that are necessary in the education, what happens is that naughty step, that time out, becomes eliminated, meaning just less and less time, because you're on board on an educational level what you need to do in order to really create healthier environment for child, better communication, realistic expectations, and so we see less and less.
Yeah.
However, many on social media, including professionals, have warped their sense of a timeout. They've said timeout is isolating. Timeout is abandonment. I mean, can we just focus on that? Abandonment.
That's what I've seen. Yeah, that's what
Right?
I've seen.
Abandonment. I mean, abandonment is to desert. It's to literally desert a child. And if you've ever watched me do a timeout with a child or with a family, they're not abandoned. They're not isolated. They're right there in front of the whole family. The family learn not to add fuel to the fire when a child is behaving a certain way, because they want what they want, which is very different, guys, to a need. And so there came the sort of gentle parenting, which was basically, I mean, really, my teachings, apart from timeout. Right? We need to listen to our children. We need to validate their feelings. We need to communicate with them so they feel heard. Well, I was doing that 20 years ago, teaching families that. But what they excluded was a time out and said, we need to do a time in.
Yeah.
But time in, we should all be doing a time in. Like, time in, we should all be in.
Life is time in.
Right? We should all be in, not out. We should all be in, right, with our families. But we should be out when we need to create a healthy boundary for that behavior. And so what it's led to is a blanket massacre of professionals chiming in and calling every time out like wrong, and people are abusing that. So when you think of the word timeout, the likely chances are you'll think of me, right? You'll think of my work, but you won't think of my technique. You won't think of how I do it. And so a lot of people, a lot of families have abused the word timeout and not done my version. But what they've done is put a child in a space and said, you need to stay there because you're not listening to me, to control the child. And that's wrong. So they're not using the application of a timeout correctly, nor are they teaching their child what is necessary and part of their development. Timeout's not going to teach a child how to use a knife and fork or how to stop screaming at the table and be respectful with everybody else. You teaching your child is what's going to teach your child that. But there has to be a moment where there is behavior that is not acceptable, because what you're doing is when you uphold that boundary as a parent, you teach your child that they are to uphold that boundary for themselves when they're older as well, that they will never tolerate being treated that way too as well, that they will never allow somebody else to do what they do and continue to do with their siblings or somebody at school. Let's be honest about this. We have a grave situation where schools are telling you that they are zero bullying policy. No, they're not. They're not. They're not. They're not having people like myself or social workers liaise between the family and the teachers. Their hands are tied by school districts that are not providing the training and those professionals to be in that space. Teachers are there to educate and and love what they're passionate about. And no bully, right? No child who is a bully, woke up one day and went, I'm going to hurt another child. They were in that environment. They were helpless. They saw that themselves, or maybe it was inflicted with them, and they came to school and felt more powerful, more in control of their landscape to then mimic the same behavior with somebody else. Now we have two children who are the victims of that. And unfortunately, we have a suicide rate with young children as young as 9 and 10 who have committed suicide because of bullying. And so we have a duty as parents to raise our children in loving environments where we can emotionally and empathetically connect with our children, but we must uphold boundaries and consequences. And my version of a time out provides a healthy boundary to say, this is not okay. This is not okay. And with those correct teachings, what we see is less and less of a need for that boundary, because the child has learned consistently and the home environment oozes of the example of how to respectfully love and treat each other with compassion, right? As we should be treating others too. And that right now is what is very misunderstood. And that's what you guys right now will be the facilitators in putting out here, right? Because it's got parents lost. It's got parents lost, because I understand and I absolutely am on board with the need to bring attention to children who are not protected in environments at home where parents are traumatized, or parents are abusive, and our children must be protected. But we must also understand the importance of raising our children with that yin yang. Otherwise, we are going to see what we're seeing now. 6-year-olds throwing chairs at teachers, 7-year-olds being expelled from school, parents coming to me, telling me, my kid punches me, they kick me in the groin, they punch me in the face, they keep slapping me, I don't know what to do. And I listen. I've sat back, guys. I sit back, I watch. And I've watched some professionals talk about the importance of respect. And when parents stand up in the crowd and they say, can you help me? What can I do if my kid's punching me in the face constantly, kicking me in the groin? And when I tell them no, they just throw something at me. And I'm so overwhelmed. I can't deal with this. They don't answer the question. They don't answer the question immediately. They don't answer it. They skirt around it. I'm bringing you hardcore facts here because I'm not skirting around anything. I want to just be truthful and honest and say that we're all here as professionals to help parents the best way we can. But we have to understand that those boundaries are important. And by chiming in and saying, time in, it shouldn't be divisive where we eliminate time out and then try to ostracize myself for something that I have used when necessary, amongst other things, like, I won't just use a naughty step, but I'll use other things as well, and just say it's wrong, because it's not wrong for a parent to do, and it doesn't harm the child, and it doesn't do anything psychologically to a child that is detrimental to their psychological health. What it does is teach the child, right? It teaches the child to understand those healthy boundaries, and there's a time and a place for that. But if you're doing the work that you need to do as a parent, then you'll eliminate doing that, because there'll really be no need. There'll really be no need.
Do you know, I've literally just realised as you were talking, so we use the naughty step, but we don't use it frequently. And I've only just realised that was the whole purpose all along, to become less frequent. And it is only for the most severe of cases. But we hardly ever do it now. But it was, again, that was influence from watching you.
It's true.
We've used it before, and I always say to him, because I've seen the whole isolation abandonment thing.
Yeah.
and I use my son as the example because my daughter's still a bit young. I always just say, look, I'm going into the next room. I'm going to come back and talk to you in a minute. And I just imagine, like, maybe in 20 years' time, you'll go, I remember when my dad walked out on me. And someone goes, where did he go? And my son's like, to the kitchen. It's not that big of a deal. I'm still in the house. I'm just in the next room, and he knows I'm coming back in 2 minutes or whatever.
Well, I think, if you've ever watched me, you'll see that I'm always around. Like, the child is very present around, the other family members. But the restraint is for the families to have more emotional control when there's been a lot of aggression and the children have been hitting, right? If it's an emotional circumstance and the child has acted out because emotionally they are feeling maybe a little bit of jealousy because a newborn has come along, I would never use a naughty step. The importance is recognizing how we nurture first the emotional connection of that child not feeling threatened by a newborn that's arrived into the family. You see, social media does not present nuance, and that's incredibly important to me. The eye to detail, the detail and the nuance in everything is very important. And to some degree, the show doesn't give all of that, because I spend over 200 hours with a family and you get a 42-minute show. Right? And so a lot of the work that I do with families, is stuff that doesn't make it into the show. And a lot of the work that I do with families is their own internalized work as adults. And sometimes that's been shown. And sometimes I've made a decision that it wasn't to be shown out of the integrity for that family member there and then, that I felt that it wasn't the right thing to do. It wasn't the best thing to do for them, and you have to make that call every day. And that call I will make every day, because it truly is about the integrity of the work that I do, with families,
Yeah. Oh, no, that's amazing. Joe, thank you so much for just your time and all of your answers and answering our questions. We just had another question from one of our listeners, and this is just generally, what is the thing you love most about your job?
Service. To be able to, it's a wonderful opportunity to absolutely love what you do, and to have that purpose, but it provides service for families to really allow parents to feel empowered with the knowledge that I can share with them, and also for the children, because many a times the children, are in a situation where if their families had more insight, more education, then they would receive what they need, because children can't always articulate what it is that they're feeling or what they need. But I would say that my gift is to be able to connect really with children on that level, and then to bring forth how I bridge the gap between parent and child and being able to do that. So for me, it will always be with a passion, being able to help families in that way, the children and, the parents, or, or the grandparents as well. I just love it. I love what I do. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that.
Amazing.
Oh, amazing. So, Joe, we've had a question from a listener whose username is Niagron. I'm sure that's not their real name. Niagron asks, what is the craziest thing you have ever experienced on the Supernanny show?
Well, crazy meaning moments that may be difficult, crazy, right? Difficult times.
Or something that just, you left that situation thinking, wow.
I've never spoken about this before, but I helped a family called the Nitti family in Florida. And there was a gentleman, a man, who was living with his girlfriend at the time that had 4 children. And during my observation, the man was very aggressive. He was a complex man for sure, but he was very intimidating and very aggressive. And he had, the care of 4 young boys that, he was in this blended family, right? His girlfriend had 4 children and came into the relationship with 4 boys. And the boys were you could see that they you know, a lot of the behavior was mimic behavior from the intimidation and the aggressiveness from John, the Nitti family. I observed, I gave my comments on what I observed with the family, the children and their behavior. And during teaching, he didn't like what I said, and he grabbed me by the throat and he pushed me up against the wall. Wow. Yeah. And that was a crazy moment, because I've had families be very defensive, or, you know, families, you know, be hot-headed, you know, tell me I don't like what you're saying, or that's not true, or this is not okay. But he didn't like, you know, what I had to say, which was the truth
Wow.
of the situation, of him being very intimidated. And he tried to intimidate me by pushing me up against the wall, and he had his hand clutched around my throat. And at that moment, one of the cameramen at that moment went to drop the camera, and I just kind of put my arm out as if to sort of signal don't, and then diffuse the situation with the father, so that I could be in a space where he could really try and receive what I had to say, because I knew that those boys were being subjected to that aggressive intimidation as well. I mean, I would say that was pretty crazy for me at that moment, because, you know, I'd been used to, you know, parents not agreeing. I mean, that's fine, but not the physicality from the parents, you know. So that was a crazy moment for me. And you know, I've recently heard, unfortunately, that man has passed away, which, you know, I'm very sorry to hear that he's passed away. And, you know, he would have left, obviously, he's, you know, the boys. I think I heard that maybe they had split up, and maybe the wife had remarried. But still, you know, those young boys at some point were in his care, and he has a daughter as well. I believe he has a daughter from another relationship, but he passed away, which obviously is very unfortunate that that's happened to him. But at the same time, you know, there was also quite a crazy moment for me, indeed.
Yeah, wow.
And, you know, a lot of things, you know, a lot of things happen, and, you know, I don't share, you know, I choose not to, or, you know, choose to do so if, you know, sometimes the moment comes up like it has here, you know.
No,
Yeah.
I think, you know, I think you kind of get that sense even from the show as well. There's a lot of stuff that's unsaid, and like you do see, like you go the extra mile for those kids and for those parents. And yeah, wow,
Yeah,
that's incredible.
yeah. So, but, you know, I mean, one of those situations, but you hope that, you know, you hope that helping a family, and it's always about helping the family first, and then, you know, in that moment it's being filmed, and I'm very particular about it is what it is. Like, it's real, you know, it's not scripted, it's real. Like, if there was a technical fault and the cameraman didn't get what I said, oh well, didn't get what I said. Like, because I'm in the moment, and once I arrive, a process happens. It doesn't stop. That's it. I'm there. I've said hello, and now we have a journey together, a transformative experience together, to hopefully bring a family to a different space, you know. And don't get me wrong, I realize that all I can do is bring the best that I can bring, and hope that they are going to continue. And some families do, right? And I get photos and emails, you know, and some families haven't. Sometimes it's been the mirror that has made both families, you know, both partners realize that actually they don't want this. They're not as committed as what they thought they were. But when I show up, I'm definitely a mirror, you know, in being able to bring the truth to a situation, and then really how I can champion them in working through that. But I understand that really that's my limit. That's what I can do. And you just hope that they continue when you're not there, you know.
Before we let you go, how can people get in touch with you or follow you? If anyone wants to send you a question or reach out, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to joefrost.com, and that's my website. So if they want private consultation, no cameras, right? And they want my help for whatever that may be, whether that's in their relationship or teenagers or other family members or parental challenges, they can go to joefrost.com, or they can go to Joe Frost on Instagram, just Joe Frost, and you'll find me on all the, on the social media platforms. So that'd be good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Joe, thank you so much for
Amazing.
coming on our
Thank you so
podcast.
much.
That was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate.
So there we go. Really hope you enjoyed that one. Don't forget to head over to joefrost.com or follow Joe on Instagram if you don't already. Myself and Jason will be back with another episode next week. If you've got any comments, any questions, or if you just want to say how much you enjoyed the interview with Joe, get in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you. We're at Parenting Tools Pod on all the socials. And we'll speak to you soon.
Sweet, I'm so tired.